Today we are going to unpack a technique designed to manage project chaos and unpredictability. If you have ever came across a complex project and thought to yourself, I have absolutely no idea how long this whole project is going to take. Well, if that happened, you are exactly in the right place. We are looking at program evaluation and review technique, which pretty much everyone just calls PERT. It's the late 1950s, and the United States Navy Special Project Office is tasked with the Polaris submarine missile program. We're talking about thousands of interdependent contractor activities here. This was entirely first of its kind technology. They were dealing with extreme uncertainty. The traditional scheduling approaches of the time offered absolutely no way to formally account for the fact that the task duration were basically a giant question. The question is, how on earth do you commit to a hard deadline when you are literally inventing the technology as you go? Okay then, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll discuss managing uncertainties. Second, the core mechanics of PERT. Third, mapping the critical path. Fourth, calculating the success probabilities. And finally, we'll wrap up with the balance assessment. Let's talk about section 1. That is managing extreme uncertainty. We have to look at the environment that essentially forced it into existence. There is this fascinating parallel history here. Right around the same time in late 1950s, two major scheduling frameworks were born. On one side, you had US Navy teaming up with Lockheed and Booz Allen Hamilton to create PERT for their massive defense mega project. On the totally opposite side, you had the chemical giant DuPont and Remington Rand developing what's called the critical path method, or CPM, specifically to schedule chemical plant maintenance. Now you really want to notice the core philosophical difference between these two approaches. CPM was built for maintenance tasks that had been done 100 times before. It assumes a deterministic single point activity duration. It assumes certainty. PERT, however, treats time as probability. It actually lets planner reason about the schedule risk instead of just pretending they magically know a single fixed completion date. It is basically the difference between saying, this will definitely take exactly 5 days, and saying, this is probably going to take 5 days. But let's actually calculate the risk moving on into section 2, which is the discussion on code mechanics of PERT. Let's lift the hood here and see how this technique actually quantifies the unknown. The entire foundation of PERT rests on what is known as 3-point estimates, and the premise here is simple. Honestly, a single number just cannot capture the reality of uncertain work. So instead of forcing your team to give you one wild shot in dark, you ask them for 3 distinct estimates for every single activity. Let's break those 3 estimates down side by side. First up, we have the optimistic time, the absolute shortest achievable duration if literally everything goes flawlessly. Next is the most likely time, or that is unidentified through M. That's the duration that would happen most often under normal everyday conditions. And finally, the pessimistic time. This is absolutely longest it would take if nearly everything goes wrong, excluding, of course, completely catastrophic events. So the crucial point is what we actually do with these 3 numbers. PERT assumes activity duration approximate a beta probability distribution. Notice it does not use perfectly symmetrical normal bell curve because, let's be real, in project management delays are usually way more probable and much larger than finishing early. To find our expected time, we use this incredibly elegant formula. You take the optimistic estimate, add 4 times the most likely estimate, add the pessimistic estimate, and divide that whole thing by 6. It's a weighted average, and it logically gives 4 times the weight to the most likely outcome while still letting those extreme best or worst case scenarios. Okay, let's make this super concrete with a mini case study. Imagine you're working at a utility company and your job is installing and commissioning a brand new, completely first of its kind power transformer. You and your planners have very limited precedent to draw on this. So you go to your engineers to get those 3-point estimates. They tell you, well, if the weather is absolutely perfect and all parts fit seamlessly, it's an optimistic 4 days. However, under normal circumstances, it will take about 6 days. But if the testing fails or we hit a massive snag, it could drag out to the pessimistic duration of 14 days. Do you see that heavy right-skewed risk there? Things are far more likely to go terribly wrong than terribly right in this scenario. Let's plug those numbers into formula. 4 plus 4 times 6 plus 14 divided by 6. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of PERT. Our expected time comes out to exactly 7 days. Even though the team's most likely gut feeling, the mathematics actively pull our expectation duration to 7. Because of that severe 14 days pessimistic estimate, we are mathematically respecting the very real risk of delay. Alright then, let's go towards section 3, mapping the critical path. So once we have calculated these expected time for every single activity in our project, what's next? Well, we map them all out along with their dependency into joint network diagram. From there, we do a forward pass from very start of the project to the end that calculates the earliest possible start and finish times. Then we do backward pass from the end all the way back to the start, figuring out the latest times a task can begin without blowing the project deadline. The difference between these two times is your slack or float. Basically, it tells you exactly how much wiggle room an activity has before it starts ruining your deadline. And that brings us to arguably the most vital concept in all of project management, the critical path. This is the longest sequence of activities through your network diagram based on expected duration. Now, because these specific activities have absolutely zero slack, any delay here delays your entire project. If a project path task slip by even one single day, your final delivery slips by 1 day, no exceptions. Which lead us directly into section 4, that is calculating success probabilities. This right here is the absolute climax of the methodology. It's where we transform those raw time estimates into a vital strategic percentage for your stakeholders. Because PERT treats the duration along the critical path as independent random variables, we get to use a brilliant statistical rule called the central limit theorem. Essentially, this means we can treat the total project duration as approximately a normal distribution. To get your project expected duration, you literally just sum up all those expected times we calculated along the critical path. By calculating the variance of each task, we can run a z-score transformation. You take your target date, subtract the expected duration, and divide by the square root of project variance. What this does is map your timeline onto a standard normal distribution table. Suddenly, you aren't just guessing anymore. You have a precise defensible percentage. You can confidently walk into a boardroom and say, we have an 85% probability of hitting our target date. A rigid deterministic schedule just cannot offer you that kind of insight. So how do we actually apply this out in real work? It boils down to pretty clean 6-step sequence. Step first, breaking down the work. Step second, ask those 3 optimistic, likely, and pessimistic estimates from your experts. Step third, calculate the expected time and variance. Step fourth, build your network diagram and identify the critical path. Step 5, run your probability calculation for the big deadline. And finally, step 6, monitor your slack values so you can shift resource around as the project inevitably evolves. This exact sequence is absolutely brilliant for high uncertainty related R&D or those massive first of its kind mega projects. Let's move to our final section, that is the balance assessment. Because look, no framework is perfect, isn't it right? We need to ground this theory in reality. PERT explicitly models uncertainty instead of forcing a false sense of precision. Plus, it gives stakeholders a genuinely risk-adjusted view of the schedule. But the limitations are very real too. Those 3-point estimates, at the end of the day, they are still highly subjective human judgments, which means that they are heavily prone to optimistic bias. Also, the math typically only sums up variance on critical path that creates what's known as merge event bias. Basically, you might accidentally ignore near critical path that could suddenly become critical, which means you might actually be understating the true risk of the project. Because of those limitations, and honestly because managing thousands of 3-point estimates becomes a nightmare. Today, PERT's probabilistic logic is baked right into advanced project management software like Primavera P6 and Microsoft Project, and it forms the foundational logic for modern Monte Carlo schedule risk simulation, which gives an even richer, far more dynamic picture of the risk. PERT truly changed scheduling from just blindly sequencing a branch of tasks to actively managing uncertainty. Which leaves me with the final question. Something for you to think as you look at your own work. Are your project deadlines actually based on a realistic spread of data, or are they deceptively from single number illusion?